Hey, thank you for joining us today for the PPM Insights webcast. As you know, these webcasts are hosted by CA Services on the second Thursday of every month at 11 Eastern. And we feature PPM experts with some fresh perspectives and expert takes on project and portfolio management hot topics. Plus, we'll also have a live Q&A at the end. So as always, please bring your questions, and you can continue the discussion in the comments at the popular PPM Insights blog. We will also be making this presentation available after the session along with a recording. So some of the tips and tricks that you're going to hear today, you'll be able to go back and use it for reference. This week's featured expert is Linda Wray, and she is a senior software architect and a very popular business intelligence expert. We all know the power of BI. The great part is Linda knows how to knock down the barriers and misconceptions when you're creating tools for it and for interpreting it. So one of the things that I really admire about her is she's got this great balance of technical skills with business acumen and has helped a lot of companies get better adoption and more from their initiatives. So you may have attended one of her sessions at one of the user conferences where she's been a speaker. She's done a number of sessions at major annual industry events, and she's done a lot of internal and external training sessions. So we're super happy. I know, Linda, that you are crazy busy these days. So I am so happy that you're able to join us today. Also, I think I need to mention that you're certified in a number of BI technologies. So we're so fortunate to have you today. I know that you're going to be covering a range of topics, so I'm going to turn it over to you and let you kind of talk through what we're going to be covering today.
Awesome. Thank you for the warm intro, Lisa. Truly appreciate it. Let me get started. So today I'll focus on business intelligence and how you can unlock the power of your data. I'll start off with common business intelligence misconceptions, primarily from a Jaspersoft advanced reporting perspective, and then I'll touch on a few popular best practices as well as tips into how you can use your system in an efficient way. And then I'll have a demo where I'll show you how you can reuse the out-of-the-box domain structures that are shipped with our CAPPM product, and then we'll move into a question and answer session. One of my favorite quotes is, the goal is to turn data into information and information into insight. This slide in itself kind of shows to an extent how you can leverage any sort of data text and make the data have meaning, right? Some of the main visualization concepts are to leverage size and to leverage color, and you can see certainly in a quote, you can pull out the key items to focus on. Love this quote. Now, common misconceptions, the common misconceptions that I'm including in this presentation are those that I hear the most and seem to have a larger impact with our customer base. One being Jaspersoft is a database or a data warehouse. Not accurate. Jaspersoft offers tool sets, right? Jaspersoft used to be a company that was acquired who developed tools that allowed you to connect to data sources, your databases or files, et cetera, to allow reporting capabilities. Another common misconception is that Jaspersoft domains store data. Not accurate. Jaspersoft domains are pointers. They're like a map, a reference to how the tables within your database are related. In the business intelligence world, it's referred to as a semantic layer, but Jaspersoft uses the term domain to define their specific semantic layer. So in other words, when you're looking at a domain, it looks at your tables. Behind the scenes, a technical resource will join your tables together and provide meaningful business-friendly names for each of the columns that will allow you to create ad hoc dynamic reports as a business analyst or someone that's non-technical. Another one I get a lot is that ad hoc reports don't have enough functionality, right, to show threshold type formatting. Now, not accurate. If you leverage an ad hoc table report, you certainly have the capability to leverage formulas and conditional formatting. So within the ad hoc view, you can create formulas to provide specific flags or numbers that you can then, when you change the report or save the report as the ad hoc view as a report, you can reference those formulas to then have conditional formatting, whether it's the font, the background, the border. You have a wide range of options there. Feel free to ping me if you want more information on that. Another item is domains are difficult to repurpose or to create. When I say repurpose, I'm referring to the out-of-the-box domains, right? You have the ability to take the structure of an out-of-the-box domain and use it in a customer-specific way, right? So if there's content in a domain that you need to be added or a certain relationship that needs to be tied to one of the out-of-the-box domains, you can certainly do so. And my demo today will demonstrate that. Another misconception is that the out-of-the-box reports are difficult to modify, or I hear that they're simple to modify. So I'll say this, okay? Modifying our out-of-the-box reports, it's essentially an average task, okay? As long as you're informed and you know what to look for, you know what you need to modify, it is not rocket science, as long as you have somewhat of a technical background, understand SQL, understand how reporting tools function. Another one that I've come across quite a bit is that ad hoc views, reports, and CAPPM portlets are really the only ways that you can create data extracts from the tool, and that's not accurate either, right? You can certainly leverage your JasperSoft Studio tool, and it's one of my favorite ways to account for certain types of extracts. It just depends on the use case and the data sourcing, et cetera, but you can essentially write a SQL statement, place it in the data set editor, and if you place all of the columns in the correct order, when you get to that canvas, you can highlight all of them, drag them into the canvas, and it's done, right? If you wanted to add filters, et cetera, then you would have to do so. But one of my favorite ways to account for extracts. And then we also have a CAPPM data extraction utility, which allows you to have extracts placed on our SFTP server if you are a SaaS customer. I'll touch on that briefly in a moment as well. So best practices, a few of the best practices that I would like to focus on are tied to folder organization within the CAPPM Advanced Reporting Repository. One item that's often overlooked for customers is separating your custom reports. Sometimes custom report folders are built within or created within the CAPPM folder. Ideally, you'd like to have a custom folder, and the naming convention is completely up to your organization. And you would place it on the same level as the CAPPM folder. Now, with that being said, if you do consider opening up your organization to leverage ad hoc capabilities, you'd need to, before opening up the ad hoc capabilities, consider how you plan to organize your folder structure, the security structure that's tied to the folder structure. Whether you're focusing on business units, you're focusing on functional reporting areas, et cetera. That's a key item that's often missed by customers as well. When you're creating ad hoc views within advanced reporting, these are a few items to keep in mind, right? If you can have the output that you need by leveraging an ad hoc table, please do so. The ad hoc tables provide better performance. They allow you to have more data, so more rows, more columns, and they have extended formatting options. As I mentioned earlier, you have like the conditional formatting that you can account for if you leverage the ad hoc capabilities. When you're leveraging the ad hoc capabilities, you do also want to keep in mind that as you're creating them, please don't cross period types. We've received a lot of feedback where the data doesn't make sense, right? And oftentimes the data doesn't make sense because you're pulling in two different periods, right? So you may have your fiscal monthly and you may have like weekly pulled in, and they don't align. Along the same path, you need to be sure that when you're creating the ad hoc views, you maintain the metric and dimension level granularity. So if you are looking at project metrics, be sure that you're using project dimensions. If you mismatch them, it is possible that you'll see duplication that you may not expect. So at any point in time, if you're leveraging the ad hoc capabilities and you see duplication, please take a look at the granularity of the metrics that you're using. Another key item is that if you're using OBS within the ad hoc views, please be sure to have your OBS type filter accounted for, because you will see duplicated records. Now this one is a little tricky for some customers to get, right? But within PPM, when you're using times, it by default will use like a date format, okay? The only time it will account for a user's time zone is when you have the display type set to date and time. Now, ad hoc views do the opposite. They by default use your time zone, the user's time zone, okay? The way in which we've accounted for this difference within our domains is that within the XML, we have some formulas where we're accounting for business dates. So we changed the data type from being a date time into being a simple date. So that way it doesn't really look at your time zone. And so to touch on options for output, especially from a data extraction perspective, you can certainly leverage portlets to run the output, place it on a server, et cetera. Now, with the data extraction utility, you do have the ability to have it placed on an SFTP server from a SaaS perspective. You would need to use the first option, which is the PPM data. On-premise customers can also leverage the data extraction utility using the data warehouse. Now, with the data extraction utilities, you don't use the emailing capabilities, and the content would not be saved in the advanced reporting module. When you're using Jaspersoft Studio reports, you can use the PPM data or the data warehouse data, a combination of the two. They will not be placed on the SFTP server if you're a SaaS customer, but you do have the ability to email the content, and you can save the content in the advanced reporting repository. You can have it overwritten, or you can have it appended with a date. Domains are also a popular way to have content accounted for, and you can create domains against your data warehouse or your PPM instance, and likewise, you can, with the Jaspersoft Studio functionality, you can also email or have that content saved in advanced reporting. So now I'll move forward into the demo portion of the presentation. I have slides in the PowerPoint presentation to cover the key steps that are necessary to modify the out-of-the-box domains. I won't go through the PowerPoint slides, but the steps are certainly there available for you if you were to download the PowerPoint presentation. All right, so here we are. So we're in CAPPM, and this is advanced reporting. This would be the main screen that you would see once you click on Home and Advanced Reporting. The first thing you'd want to do is go to your domains and click on your View List. When you click on your View List, you see all of the available domains in your system, whether you've created other domains or not. This is our search view. So what I'll do today is I will select the project management domain. And so what we'll do is we'll export the structure of the project management domain. So I'll cover the items on the main screen here. When creating a domain, you provide a name, an ID. The ID is how the system manages. It's somewhat of like a primary key or an ID field tied to the domain. You can provide a description. The save location is where you want to save the domain within the repository. Your data source is whether you're connecting to your data warehouse or if you're connecting to the transactional system, your PPM database. The domain design option down here provides two. You can edit with your domain designer. If you're creating a new domain, you would go in and you would simply define or select the tables that you would like to include. If you create an export, then you're able to upload the export, which would be the structure. You would import it into using the upload functionality here. Your security file would only be applicable if you plan to have row-level security in the domain. So within the out-of-the-box domains, they all have a security file which is responsible for pulling your JasperSoft user ID and mapping it to the field in one of the security tables to allow that row-level security. So please keep that in mind. Locale bundles, that's really to account for languages. So now what I'll do is I'll click on the Edit with Domain Designer link under the Domain Design section. Sometimes it takes a little bit for it to load up. But what it's doing is it's pulling up the structure of the project management domain. And by default, it always goes to your display tab. So I'll touch on the tabs that we'll review today and the content that's available in the other tabs. But for now, what we'll do is we'll export the design. So you can see in the top left section of the advanced reporting screen here, you can click on Export Design. When you click on Export Design, what it's doing, it's pulling all the information together. And then it asks you, do you want to include the schema name with the table names in the structure? And really what it's asking there is it's saying, hey, you know, when we create this XML file, do we want to account for the schema? Now, if you're using a database that has schema references, which is like a subset of the database, then you would want to say yes. And when you do so, what it does is, you can see on the right side of my screen, it will place the schema name within the XML. If you say no, it won't place a schema name, and then you'll see we'll say no for this particular extract. And right now what it's doing is it's processing. So it just placed it in my downloads folder here in the top right section of my screen, and what I'll do is I'll just, I'll copy that, guys, and I'll paste it in my demo section, okay? So now we're essentially finished with exporting the design at this stage. So you can click on cancel and go back out, or you can simply go up to create and we'll say create a new domain. And so we'll name this domain Linda's World. And you can see it provides a resource ID. You can provide a description. And I will place this domain in our users folder because I will delete it. It's in the demo environment. The data source, all of the out-of-the-box domains leverage the data warehouse, so I will select the data warehouse connection, the DWHB. And you can see it says the data source is set. And then from here, I'll click on Create Domain Designer. I'm sorry, I'll click on Upload. And I'll choose the file, and when I choose the file, it brings me to the last place I was. And so I'll select the export file that we just created. So while it's loading, so as you saw, when I clicked on the Edit with Domain Designer, essentially what that does is it says, okay, what schema do you want to connect to, right? And at that stage, because I'm creating a new domain, I can select the data warehouse or I can select the PPM instance. Once you select the schema, it will show you all of the tables on the left side panel, and I'll show you where that will be now. So now that I've saved it, you can see Linda's World is here for editing, so I'll right-click and I'll say Edit. It brings you back to the Edit Domain screen, and now when I click Edit with Domain Designer, it won't prompt me to select the schema because we have the export file, okay? So what it's going to do is it will essentially look at the data source that we have connected, and it will use the same structure within the design. Taking its time. Somebody. And so once it opens, it will open on the Design tab. On the Design tab, that's where you're able to modify your sets and your items. And so sets within Advanced Reporting are the folders that you see within the repository, and the items would be any of the fields, whether you have your dimensions or you have your metrics. It's loading up. And so I'll walk through how to add an item to the domain. And so let me show. So when you're looking at adding an item, the key things that you would want to keep in mind is what table already needs to be in the system, or how you're going to join or connect the data that you need to add into the domain. So I'm not sure why it's not coming up for me, but bear with me one moment, please. We'll try that again. And so when it opens, hopefully sooner than later, what we'll do is we'll look for the team table. And so you can see on the right side of the screen here, I have the relationship that I will make in the domain. So I'll find the team table. I'll need to add the resource table. This is one item that I often hear customers would like to account for, right? So in the project management domain, you may have a subset of resource information, right? But you may want to have some of your resource custom attributes available, or some of the additional fields from the resource table. So what you would do is you would join the resource table to that structure, okay? Now be mindful, you have to understand SQL, you have to understand join relationships when you're modifying domains, because you can certainly cause Cartesian products or loops in the data. But as I mentioned, it will default to the Display tab. And so the Sets and Items section in the middle here, this is where you see all of the dimensions and any metrics that have been defined. When you're modifying an out-of-the-box domain, you can certainly remove any content that you see in this section here, as well as add content, okay? But what we'll do is we'll go to your Tables tab first. And on the Tables tab, on this left side panel, this is where you see all of the tables content, like objects that you have access to, that you can add to your domain design, okay? So we're going to scroll down and get to the resource table, and so I'll select DWH, and so I'm making it very simple. So I'm just simply adding the booking manager from the resource table. So when you select the resource table, you click the right arrow, it will move it over into the selected table section. Once you move it into the selected table section, you would go to joins. This is where you're defining the relationship that will make this table's content relevant to the remaining structure. And so here you can see you have your resource domain, but we're going to look for the core table that's already in the system, and we're going to join to that table. So we have your INV team table, and the INV team table has your resource key. So you'll select your resource key on the left side, and then you'll find your resource table on the right side, and you'll select your resource key here. Now you're able to define the kind of join that you want to make. And so in this case, what we'll do is we'll say we want a left outer join. If you hover over it, it tells you, which joins you're looking at, but the images also let you know with you're using the left join, you want all of the information that's available on that left side, and if it exists on the right side, show it. If it doesn't exist, that's fine, okay? So now the join relationship has been made, and it's set to be used. So we'll click here, and then we'll click on joins on the selected table. So you can see you have the resource key from the team. There's a left outer join on the resource table. So what that means is now we can go to your display tab. We can expand the join tree. We can find that resource table, and we want to pull over the booking manager. So now the question is, where do we want to place that booking manager field? You expand the main set table, and you find the location where you want to add it. In the team set, you can then select your booking manager, and you push it over, and now you can see the booking manager is available. With the booking manager being available, you can highlight it, click edit, and then you can make it as to where the label that's seen within the domain is captured in the top text box. Booking ID, if you have a convention that you have, typically I recommend you have some sort of prefix that makes it as to where you know that it's custom. If it's a dimension, you certainly want to come down and you say there's no calculation, and you can note whether it's a dimension or a measure, and you say save. So once you click save, you now have a domain that has additional content, and you click OK to confirm the structure, and you now have a custom domain that was used from an out-of-the-box domain that was available with the product. And so now it's saving to the advanced reporting repository, and you have the ability to create ad hoc views and ad hoc reports leveraging this domain. And so we're actually at 11:30 exactly. So now we can move into questions. Lisa, I don't know if we're going to open the line now.
Right. Thanks. And actually, if you do have questions for Linda, you can enter them in the Q&A window, and we'll answer them right now during the Q&A segment. And we do have one kicking off here, Linda. What do you see as some of the more easily avoidable pitfalls for DIY, or I think they're probably meaning modifying out-of-the-box reports?
Okay, yeah, so in modifying, what I found is that in not understanding the parameters that need to have default values, that's typically the #1 item. So we do have a certain group of parameters that need to be modified when you begin the process of modifying your out-of-the-box reports. So that would be the key thing, is knowing how to set those parameters. Also downloading the template file and ensuring that template file is in the same folder as the report you're developing. That's often another item.
Okay, great. And next question, what would be the normal use case for creating custom domain? Is it to restrict or add tables? And can we combine two domains and create a custom domain? That's a multi-part question for you.
Yes, awesome. Okay, yes, so typical use cases would be, let's say, for instance, you are leveraging a domain. So I'll answer one of the questions first, which is, can you use two domains? When you're creating ad hoc views, you can only select one domain. With that being the case, domains have predefined joins, predefined content. So from a project perspective, you may have, 90% of that content is tied to the project, and then we have 10% of the resource information. But you may need to have your resource department OBS also included with some of the custom attributes. So that's typically one of the use cases where you would want to add additional content that's not already included. So some content that was in the resource management domain, you would want to move into the project, if that makes sense. So that's a typical use case. Now, with that being said, that's the typical scenario. I think that answered all of the questions, I believe.
Okay, yep. And to the person who asked the question, if you need more clarification on that, ask another question. Next one we have for you is there an underused capability you wish more people would use or suggest learning more about?
So, yes, I do feel that many customers don't leverage the ad hoc views as much as they could. It certainly can be used in a more powerful way, if that makes sense. So the ad hoc views, the ad hoc reports, the JasperSoft Studio reports can all be placed in dashboards, dashlets. They can also be placed within the application through using HTML portlets, things like that. But that's often not really looked at.
Great. And again, if you do have questions, you can type them into the Q&A panel on the WebEx interface, and we will take those now. While we're waiting for any more questions to come in, Linda, are there good resources that you recommend for learning more about some of the things that maybe people haven't had the confidence to do themselves? Are there resources out there that they can get to easily to kind of build their skills and work with these things?
Yeah, sure. So on our DocOps site, we do reference a few locations where you can, from a JasperSoft perspective, start off with the JasperSoft training, which is at a very basic level. And then within CA, we also have offerings where we provide advanced reporting training, and then we also have data warehouse training, and we have a few more training modules that are coming through. And then for some customers, they may go through the JasperSoft training on the JasperSoft portal, and then, they may also want to have a deeper level, and so they may engage services as to where services can come in and have one-on-one training and get more complicated solutions defined.
Great. And it's nice to know there's sort of a tiered approach that you can take towards acquiring the skills to be able to customize something to meet whatever the needs are of a particular organization.
Right. So as far as customizing, we do, as I mentioned a moment ago, we do have a custom report module that's coming out that will focus on JasperSoft Studio reporting. When it comes to customizing like your reporting portal itself, we do have some customers, they engage services, and we have some customers that are incredibly creative in leveraging the different technologies that are available. And at times we do have HTML portlets leveraging other business intelligence tools even. So there's a wide range of options that are available from a BI perspective, right? We do have the OData connector now that's available. So for SaaS customers, you can certainly leverage the OData connector to use like your Tableaus, your ClickViews, Spotfire, a lot of other like data visualization tools, Power BI, things of that nature. So we have like a very robust SaaS offering now to also allow you to have like your on-premise EDWs and business intelligence tools accounted for as well.
That's great. Thank you. And it doesn't look like we have any more questions coming in from the participants. So I want to thank you, Linda, because I know that, as I mentioned before, you've been crazy busy. So thank you so much for spending some time with us today. And for those of you that joined us for the webcast, we will have the deck and the recording available so that you can go back and refer to some of the topic areas that Linda talked about. So you can join us again next month on the second Thursday for the PPM Insights webcast, and thank you again for joining us today. Thanks, Linda.
Thank you, everyone.